Alright guys, welcome to part 2, and in this part we will be removing the cylinder head, and we're going to take a look at the pistons and everything else inside the motor and see what's up. Hopefully we get a prime good example of a blown head gasket here. On top of that, let me just take a look at my camera. Looks like I still got to clean out the camera lens. As you can see here, there's a little black dot. I'm going to have to take care of that real quick. But I hope you guys enjoyed that first video of us taking apart everything we need to. Now it's just mainly getting the timing chain cover off, the pulley, loosening this power steering pump, which is tucked away inside over there. And then, in theory, we should be able to take the cylinder head off with no problem. And then we need to get the cylinder head sent into the machine shop and go from there. So here's me removing the crankshaft pulley, and it turns out you don't need to take off the power steering belt, or maybe it could just be this vehicle with such a stretch belt, but we had to take this part off here in order to get to the timing chain cover. Now I'll probably be voiceovering everything that I'm trying to explain in this video just due to the fact in here I'm actually sniffling like crazy. But I was explaining how to remove the engine mount, and in order to do that we would need something to support the engine while we are working on the engine, whether that be a jack with a 2x4, but in my case I had a transmission jack that worked out perfectly fine in order to remove this engine mount. Now it's only two 14mm bolts on the top that takes off the engine mount, and one 14mm nut that's on the bottom of the mount. I just hate this car because there's really no room to work with. Now I'm removing the 14mm bolts that are attaching this engine mount bracket. And then I used my pry bar to free everything up. And eventually it came out. Here I'm just writing everything in little baggies, so when it comes to reassembly, I know where everything goes back. This is a completely optional tool, but I just decided to pull out the air ratchet because I wanted things to go quicker. Now at this point I decided to take out the water pump. And not everything with an air ratchet could fit in these small crevices of this car, so hand ratchet it is. So once you get all the 10mm bolts out, there was also a couple 14mm bolts. It's just a matter of fishing this timing chain cover out of this. Yeah, it was a pretty tight fit. So once the timing chain cover is off, just inspect the chain guides, make sure there's no extra sloop. But Toyota decided to have 3 little marks on the chain and also on the camshaft and the crankshaft itself. You just want to spin the motor, make sure they all align properly before taking off this chain itself and the cylinder head. To take off the chain, I'm taking off the timing chain guides, and then sure enough, eventually the timing chain will just come right off. Now before you take off the camshaft and the camshaft bearings, you want to have a designated spot to lay down your parts, that way you don't have any of the bearings mixed up by accident. So here we have a service cart that will suffice as our table to lay down our parts. Now while unscrewing the camshafts, you definitely want to loosen all the bearings before taking them all off completely, because you have the springs pushing up on the camshafts and you don't want to accidentally break the camshafts while disassembling the bearings. And once you get everything off, your cart should look like this. So as you guys can see here, I have it organized to the point where I know which bearing goes back to which place on the cylinder head. And the camshaft obviously on the left and the camshaft on the right with the variable valve timing sprocket. They could stay off. We're going to actually just put these back on so we just don't accidentally, if this gets all knocked over and everything like that, we might be screwed and we might have to, you know, buy new bearings, and we don't want that. So as you can see here, I'm putting the camshaft bearings back on, screwing the screws a few threads in the cylinder head. Now, since we're getting pretty close, we just want to make sure everything else is off the cylinder head. Just make sure you look for any evap lines, any coolant lines, even exhaust bolts. Take a light, look around the whole entire cylinder head, because when you remove the cylinder head, you don't want to accidentally rip anything while taking the head off. So in order to take off this head here, you're going to need this bi-hex 8mm tool. This one is a Toyota specific one for these engines and other Toyota engines, and you're going to need a breaker bar. With this one, you could actually pick it up at O'Reilly's. It's like 60 bucks. It's definitely worth an investment if you definitely have Toyotas within the family, or if you're like me, you do this for a living. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to loosen all of them. That way the head could just start lifting up rather than taking them off one by one. Now while removing the cylinder head, make sure you try to go straight up and not slide across the top of the block. We finally got our cylinder head out, and now you just want to make sure you want to inspect everything. You definitely want to inspect the lifters and make sure there's no excessive wear. And if you're brave enough, try to put this cylinder head right above your head and make sure there's no burnt valves. If you're uncomfortable that you might accidentally knock off the lifters, just definitely take it in the machine shop and they'll take care of you from there. Now, all we have to do is wait. Got our head cylinder back from the machine shop, and now it's time to put it back on.
Nothing.